You don't belong in this room." The words cut through the air like a slap sharp cold, and loud enough to slice through the jazz music flowing steadily inside the private suite on the top floor of the Aurora Club. In that instant, the whole of Chicago still shimmered behind the glass, but no one was looking at the skyline anymore. Every gaze fixed on one point, the black woman in a coral wrap dress standing near the glass wall, one hand resting lightly on a small carry on the other, still holding a phone from a call that hadn't yet ended. Jordan Ellis, 38 years old, didn't move. She didn't flinch, didn't turn around. She simply stood there. The one who had spoken was Brooke Hastings, 27, only daughter of tech billionaire Richard Hastings. She hadn't tried to lower her voice or pretend it was a slip. On the contrary, the faint curve of her lips showed it was no accident, but a calculated strike, a reminder to everyone in the room who really owned this place. Brooke tilted her champagne glass slightly, the golden bubbles catching the warm light, and glanced around with satisfaction as she saw a few heads turn, a few eyebrows lift, a few chuckles held back. The suite had been alive with the sound of refined wealth, the clink of crystal, the soft tread of leather shoes on Italian marble, the mellow saxophone drifting from a corner stage. But after that sentence, it was as if someone had squeezed the air out of the room. The music kept playing, but the atmosphere changed color. People didn't need context. They just needed to know one thing: the Hastings heiress had chosen her target. Jordan kept her eyes on the city. Beneath her, Chicago glittered a sea of lights from the towers, streaks of moving headlights crawling down the highways, the dark ink of Lake Michigan in the distance. From behind, she might have looked like a misplaced guest, someone standing in the wrong room at the wrong party. But Jordan didn't feel out of place. She'd stood in far more suffocating rooms than this. Across the suite, a middle-aged man in a tuxedo lowered his voice. "Who is she? PR, maybe?" The woman beside him shrugged her gaze, drifting over the coral dress with no visible logo. The simple carry on the understated heels. "Looks like an assistant. Probably wandered in." They spoke as if Jordan couldn't hear them. But she did. Every word. "Come on," Brooke leaned toward the nearby group, her tone mocking. "Don't tell me I'm the only one thinking it. She's not press. She's not a speaker. Who brings an intern into a shareholder's suite?" A soft giggle escaped from the bar area. A young man with a loosened tie raised his cocktail glass like he was toasting the joke. A woman nearby lifted her drink halfway, then stopped, a flicker of discomfort crossing her face, before she chose silence instead. The kind of silence that agrees by omission. No one said stop. No one said you've gone too far. They didn't have to. In places like this, the winner is always the one who speaks louder, not the one who's right. Jordan heard it all, but didn't give Brooke so much as a glance. Her chest rose and fell slightly, the controlled rhythm of someone long practiced at staying steady under judgmental eyes. In her mind, a calm, dry voice reminded her, "Same test, a different room, don't react. Let them expose themselves first." Near the bar, a man in his 30s with messy hair and a media access creator badge paused mid-sip, eyes on Jordan. His name was Jason Cole. He didn't laugh. He just watched the storyteller in him, recognizing it instantly. This wasn't a joke, it was an opening scene. A young waiter walked past with a tray of oysters that trembled slightly in his hand. He didn't dare look at Jordan, but in his quick, uncertain glance was something different from the rest: awkwardness and quiet empathy. Brooke, noticing Jordan's unshaken composure, grew irritated. She turned fully heels, clicking against the marble in sharp, impatient beats. "Don't just stand there like a statue," she drawled, dragging the last word as if speaking to staff. "What's your name, sweetheart? Still no answer?" The elevator at the end of the hall chimed softly. Two new guests stepped out. One of them glanced at Jordan, a flicker of recognition in his eyes, then quickly looked away as if something in his mind had stirred, but he wasn't ready to name it. Brooke pursed her lips. Probably someone's +1, she said louder this time, ensuring everyone could hear. Or worse, some brand rep waiting to pitch her skincare line. The laughter came clearer now, not hidden, but confident affirming. The suite moments ago, buzzing with talk of funding rounds, valuations, and exits, had found new entertainment guessing who the unfamiliar black woman was. Jordan closed her eyes for a single controlled breath. When she opened them again, everything sharpened the glow of the lights, the glasses in other people's hands, the curious and condescending stares, the city below, humming like a circuit waiting for someone to flip the switch. She knew what pain was. She'd just learned not to let others see it. From behind a marble pillar, a pair of watchful eyes observed Lily Chen, 24 junior analyst, clutching a stack of client folders, her name tag slightly crooked. She had seen how the room changed with one sentence, how the woman by the window stood silent, unbowed. The silence made Lily's throat tighten, though she didn't know why. Why didn't she say something? Why didn't anyone? Brooke sipped her champagne again, the taste of victory lingering on her tongue. She turned to her friends, lowering her voice just enough to sound casual, but loud enough to carry. Look at her. No logo, no badge, no escort. This isn't general admission. Somewhere a man added, these days everyone thinks they can get into rooms like this with a nice story on LinkedIn. More laughter, more headshakes. Jordan heard it all. Her lips curved slightly, barely noticeable. If anyone stood close enough, they would have seen it wasn't fear or confusion in her eyes, but something far more dangerous patience. She shifted her stance, resting her weight on one foot, her hand relaxing on the handle of her carry-on. Her phone lit up for a moment. Maya's name flashed on the screen, but Jordan let it fade. Not yet. Not now. A single calm thought crossed her mind, sharp and steady as the Chicago skyline beyond the glass. They think this room belongs to them. They have no idea what they're standing on or who it belongs to. The jazz rose again, trying to smooth the tension that stretched between the glances. Overhead, the golden lights poured across Jordan's skin, making her seem both part of the scene and apart from it entirely. In rooms like these, people often believe power belongs to whoever talks, the loudest laughs, the hardest commands, the fastest. But tonight at the Aurora Club, a different kind of power was standing still. No logo, no badge, no introduction. Just patience waiting for the right moment. And while everyone in that suite thought they were watching an outsider near the glass wall, Jordan Ellis was already standing exactly where she needed to be, the woman about to reframe the entire picture. No one in that room knew that the woman standing silently by the glass wall had once stepped into another room, smaller, colder, tighter 10 years ago, wearing a dress just as simple as this one. Back then, Jordan Ellis was 28, a young founder with eyes full of belief. She had presented her clean energy project to 12 white investors in a San Francisco hall. They nodded. They smiled. They said the kind of things that sounded like praise. You're truly inspiring. We admire your determination, then left without investing a single dollar. That night, Jordan walked out of the building under the yellow glow of the streetlights as light rain began to fall. She stood there, her shoes soaked through, and realized that some rooms would never open for ideals, only for power. And she swore that one day she would build a key big enough to open every door. Now inside the ballroom of the Aurora Club, that vow still echoed in her chest, though her face remained perfectly still, almost cruel in its calm. Outside, Chicago blazed beneath the clouds. Inside, the air carried the familiar scent of old money antique paintings on the walls, Deep brown leather chairs, marble floors, polished like mirrors. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of power, the kind that makes people forget how to breathe. Brooke Hastings sat on a sofa, crossing her legs, reclaiming the center of attention. The light glimmered off her diamond necklace, each sparkle like an exclamation point. How amusing, Brooke said, her voice pitched just high enough for nearby guests to hear. I think someone needs to double-check the guest list. Tonight is the private mixer for the Hastings Foundation, not a public charity event. A few people chuckled, a few nodded. No one noticed how identical their smiles looked, the synchronized expression of those afraid to go against the order. Jordan turned slowly, her gaze sweeping past Brooke, past the champagne glass, past the faces smiling and watching. Her eyes stopped at the far wall where a gold plaque read, "The Aurora Club for the Pioneers of the New Century." Pioneers. The word itself felt like a joke. She had once believed in it, believed that in the 21st century, open-mindedness would replace privilege and merit would triumph over prejudice. But tonight, standing in this room, she saw the truth. The only difference was that prejudice now wore tailored suits and drank champagne instead of wearing blue-collar shirts. She stood still, looking into the glass. Reflected there was her own figure, tall, poised face, steady and unshaken. Behind her stretched an entire world, whispering about her, labeling her, diminishing her. She heard it all, but none of them knew that every light bulb above them, each one, every single glow, was paid for by an account under the name Apex Capital. And she was the one who signed that check. A few meters away, Daniel Mercer, senior advisor to Hastings Holdings, was speaking with a group of shareholders. Calm and polished, his manner reflected the ease of a man accustomed to solving problems with soft power. When Brooke gestured subtly, Daniel frowned and walked toward Jordan. "Excuse me, ma'am." He began, his tone courteous but firm. "This area is reserved for active shareholders. If you're not with logistics or press, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to step out. We're having some private discussions." Jordan didn't turn her head. The light from the chandelier cast a warm bronze sheen over her hair. She stayed silent for a moment, as if deciding whether to give this man a chance to correct himself. Daniel mistook her silence for hesitation. He lowered his voice, but his words remained rigid. "All board-related events are verified through the CRM list. I'm quite sure your name isn't on it." From a nearby table, a woman in a pearl jacket whispered, "I was actually wondering the same thing who approved tonight's guest list." The man beside her replied, "Just look at her. Not our kind." That sentence wasn't just an opinion. It rebuilt the same invisible wall that had kept Jordan on the outside for years. She inhaled slowly, her eyes dropping to the reflection in someone's glass of golden wine, faces upon faces, all measuring her worth. Behind her, her phone lit up. A message from Maya Lopez, Chief Operating Officer of Apex Capital, appeared on the screen. Apex's $2.7 billion position still active on Hastings disclosures. "Do you want me to freeze comms yet?" Jordan glanced at it, her fingers brushing the screen, but she didn't respond. Not yet. She lifted her chin, turned slightly, and for the first time that evening met Daniel's eyes. "Is there a dress code I missed?" she asked softly, or just one for faces. The question was simple, but the air instantly tightened. Daniel blinked. From across the room, Brooke froze, mid-sip eyes locked on Jordan. "I think you're misunderstanding." Daniel stammered, "I'm only ensuring the integrity of the event." "Of this space," Jordan corrected. "That's what you mean, isn't it?" Her gaze swept the room, then returned to him. "This space built on capital you no longer control. 3 people nearby heard every word. One lowered his glass. Another looked around, uneasy. Daniel swallowed hard, voice faltering. "Are you suggesting that you're somehow connected to Hastings' books?" Brooke burst out laughing, her high-pitched voice cutting through the tension. "Oh my God, she's probably some consultant who reads too many reports, or maybe a finance podcast fan." A silver-haired man, his cheeks flushed with alcohol, raised his glass toward Jordan. "If you're here for publicity, darling, the media floor's downstairs. You'd fit right in." The laughter erupted again, loud this time, cruel and certain. But Jordan didn't move. She simply tilted her head slightly and spoke quietly into her phone, her tone low and precise. "Prepare the red file." No one caught her words, only saw her thumb tap the screen. For a moment, silence returned, heavier, sharper, no one daring to disturb it. The jazz music played on, but even the saxophone sounded offbeat, as though the musician himself could feel the shift in the room. Brooke frowned. Who's she texting anyway? Googling private equity. This time, a few people laughed, but the sound was uneven. Some forced smiles only to avoid Brooke's eyes. A young waiter passed by. Brooke snapped her fingers for another glass of wine, muttering, "Standing there like a statue, at least she makes good decor." Jordan still didn't react. She didn't see them as opponents. She saw them as the test. Her eyes found the mirror across the room. In its reflection, her face looked calm, but her gaze burned with something newly sharpened, like a blade honed to perfection. At the back of the room, Lily Chen was still watching. She bit her lip, her fingers flying over her tablet, searching the internal database. A hunch pushed her forward, and then she found it. The name Jordan Ellis appeared clearly on the official document: managing partner, co-founder, Apex Capital, board member Hastings Apex Innovation Initiative. Lily froze, her blood running cold. She looked up at Jordan again, and suddenly everything made sense. The stillness, the composure, the quiet authority of someone who no longer needed to prove anything. And she understood the woman this room was mocking was the one who owned the room itself. Across the suite, Jordan closed her eyes, feeling her heartbeat steady. Not fast, not slow. Only one thought remained in her mind. Silence isn't surrender. Silence is ignition. She opened her eyes. Outside, the wind swept against the glass, the silver moonlight spilling across her shoulder. Inside this chamber of power, everyone was watching, but no one was truly seeing. Only she, the woman in the coral dress, knew exactly what was coming. And when it came, it wouldn't need noise. It would only need a single touch at the right time in the right place, enough to make an entire empire bow. No one in the room noticed the exact moment the familiar order began to crack. It did not shatter all at once. It made no noise. It was just confused glances, wine glasses lowering awkward smiles that did not know whether to stay or disappear. And in the middle of it all, Jordan Ellis remained still. She did not speak. She did not frown. Yet her silence forced the entire room to listen. Across from her, Daniel Mercer stepped back one pace, unsure himself whether it was from confusion or fear. He glanced toward Brooke Hastings, searching for a signal. Brooke answered with a cold look that said, "Handle it. Do not let her take over the room." Daniel drew a deep breath, reclaiming the stance of a man who knew what power was and how to protect it. He adjusted his collar, his voice dropping into the precise register of someone who is there to keep order. "Ma'am, I have to repeat, this area is reserved for active shareholders. If you are someone's guest, please return to the lounge floor." His voice was not loud, but it carried easily to the nearby group. A few more eyes turned. A middle-aged woman nodded faintly. A young man let a thin smile slip onto his face. The room began to curl in around Jordan like a tightening whirlpool. Brooke watched it, lips curving her hand lazily, turning her champagne glass. "Well done, Daniel," she murmured. "Clear the air for me." But Daniel was no longer sure whom he was clearing it for, the young heiress, or something 10 times larger than himself, standing perfectly still in front of him. He went on, trying to keep his tone steady. "Could you tell me who granted you access to this area so that I can confirm it with the logistics team?" Jordan did not answer. She only tilted her head slightly, her eyes gliding over the name badge on his chest, Daniel Mercer, Special Advisor. Then she spoke slowly, each word dropping like a bead of heavy metal. "Are you sure you want that answer?" Daniel hesitated. "What do you mean?" Jordan turned fully towards him. The air shifted. The ceiling lights reflected in her eyes, sharp and deep, like the surface of a lake, hiding a storm. She stepped in half a pace, just enough for everyone nearby to feel the strange pressure of someone who did not need to raise her voice to make others retreat. "I am only asking," she said, "do you want to hear it from me or from the very system you are talking about?" A faint shiver ran down Daniel's spine. He had not yet answered when, from the corner of the room, a voice rose, not loud, but clear and trembling. "Daniel, you should stop." Everyone turned. Lily Chen, the young analyst, was standing near a stone column tablet in hand, her face pale with tension, but her eyes blazing. Daniel frowned. "Lily, what are you doing here?" She swallowed hard, but still stepped forward. She is Jordan Ellis," Lily said, her voice shaking but clear. "Co-founder of Apex Capital, a board-level shareholder in the Hastings and Apex joint venture." The room went dead silent. No one moved. Brooke was the first to pierce the void. She let out a laugh, the sound ringing like shattering glass. "That is adorable. She photoshopped a nameplate to scare you all." "Daniel, please." Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came. He looked at Jordan. Her gaze was so calm, it was terrifying. In his mind, a meeting from more than 2 years ago flickered back. A thick stack of letter-sized documents bearing the Apex Capital logo and a line of blue ink under the heading Confidential Agreement. A signature he had never thought he would see again, at least not like this. Daniel felt his throat go dry. As the silence stretched, Lily lifted her tablet, her voice suddenly stronger. "I can confirm it. Her name is in the official records. She is not a guest. She owns the majority of this venture." A few guests drew in a sharp breath. A man bent his head, unlocked his phone, and began typing quickly into a search bar, "Jordan Ellis, Apex Capital." Within seconds, a ripple of O's spread through that corner of the room like a wave. Images filled the screens. Jordan Ellis giving a TED Talk in Singapore, listed among Forbes' 50 women rebuilding the economy, wearing a coral outfit under blazing golden lights. A blonde woman near the bar whispered, "It is her, it is really her." Brooke snapped, "You are all being played. Fake profiles are everywhere. Powerful black investor, does that sound familiar? It is a clickbait trick." But no one answered, because at the far side of the room, an older woman, Margaret Linfield, chief executive of a financial media firm, set her glass down and gave a cold smile. "She does not need your father to mention her, Brooke. She owns his contingency plan." Brooke spun around. "What did you say?" "You heard me," Margaret said slowly, each word landing with weight. "Without the $2.7 billion from Apex Capital 3 years ago, your father's Hastings holdings would have been delisted from NASDAQ." The sentence landed like a low, distant explosion. Everyone heard it, and everyone understood. Jason Cole, the content creator from earlier, instinctively pulled out his phone and hit record. The lens swept slowly from Brooke's frozen face to Jordan, still standing in complete composure. He knew he was capturing what could later be called the moment power flipped. Jordan noticed him filming and glanced over. With just that look, Jason understood and lowered his phone. "No need," Jordan said softly, just loud enough for him. "Let them hear it with their own ears." Megan Price, a financial reporter, walked in at that moment and immediately sensed the strange tension. She pulled out her phone, started a live stream, the tiny red light blinking. Brooke saw it and shouted, "Turn that off, this is not a press event." Jordan turned back her voice, low, smooth and cool. "It is all right. Let them record it. The truth has never needed to fear the light." Brooke tightened her grip on her champagne glass, but her hand shook. She was losing control, something she had never experienced at any of her father's parties. Daniel stood between the two women, his heart pounding, sweat gathering at his collar. He wanted to say something to salvage the situation, but every word felt meaningless. Because he understood that from the moment Lily spoke, that name out loud, the order of the room, had changed. Jordan turned to Lily and gave a slight nod, not quite gratitude, more a confirmation you saw it and you understand. Lily nodded back, still gripping her tablet like a shield. The room stayed silent. Only Megan's camera and the tight, burning sound of strained breathing remained. Jordan spoke very softly, but with perfect clarity. Silence is not avoidance. It is a choice, and sometimes that choice is power. Her gaze fixed directly on Brooke. "You asked me who I am. Now you have your answer." Brooke swallowed hard and tried to push back. "You think a few numbers on the internet will scare me?" "My father, your father Jordan cut in, is standing on the money I used to resuscitate his company. Without me, this room would not exist tonight." No one added another word. In the heavy silence, the lights of the Aurora Club seemed to soften, reflecting off the polished stone floor. In a far corner, Jason murmured, almost without realizing it, "This is not a confrontation. This is the truth stripped bare." Jordan glanced his way expressionless, then turned back to Brooke, who was trying to force a smile even as her lips trembled. She spoke slowly, almost in a whisper. "You just asked who invited me here." There was a pause. "It was me." Brooke frowned, not understanding. Jordan lifted her chin eyes on the gold letters carved into the wall, the Aurora Club. Then she enunciated each word like stamping a seal. "Because I am the one who paid to rent this room." The words fell heavier than thunder. No one seemed to breathe. No one moved. Only Jordan, the woman in the coral dress, shifted her shoulder slightly and looked out through the glass where the Chicago sky was lighting up in waves like electricity. In the reflection, her face looked cold and radiant all at once. And someone no one quite knew who whispered a line that the whole city would repeat one day. When real power stands up, it does not need to shout. It only needs to stand still. The room fell silent, not with the polished quiet you expect at billionaire gatherings, but with a thick, heavy silence, where every breath carried the metallic taste of confusion. Jordan Ellis's words still hung in the air. "I am the one who paid to rent this room." No one knew what to do with that sentence. Brooke Hastings blinked, then burst out laughing, the sound too loud, too urgent, more survival reflex than amusement. How adorable, she said, her voice warped by anger. "You really think a few lines will make people believe you are the one in charge here? Seriously, Daniel, why are you just standing there?" But Daniel Mercer did not answer. His eyes were nailed to his phone screen where the search results still glowed. Jordan Ellis, co-founder of Apex Capital, $2.7 billion investment in Hastings Holdings. The color had drained from his face, and for the first time all evening it was Daniel, the man who normally controlled every conversation, who had no idea what to say. Nearby whispers began to ripple. A man with salt and pepper hair leaned down and murmured to his companion, "She is not joking. I remember the name Apex in the rescue file from the year 2022. The other replied softly but unsteady, "That is impossible. If it is true, then she is holding their capital in her hands." Fragments of conversation fell across the room like a shower of hail. And it was those sounds, small and indistinct, that frightened Brooke the most, because she could hear what lay beneath the murmur's doubt. She turned on Daniel, her voice low and tight. "You are the advisor. Are you really going to let people laugh in Hastings Holdings' face like this?" Daniel drew a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "Miss Hastings," he said, "I will verify it immediately." He pulled out his phone, his hand trembling slightly, and opened the internal system. But as soon as he entered his credentials, the screen went black. A red line of text appeared. "Access denied, credentials suspended." Daniel froze, tried again. The same. He attempted to log into the internal communication channel for the public relations team. Nothing. He looked up pale. Jordan was still gazing out through the glass, as if untouched by the chaos beginning to unravel behind her. The city lights washed over her cheekbones, soft yet cold. "What is happening?" Brooke demanded, her voice climbing in pitch. "It could just be a temporary glitch." Daniel stammered. "The system might be under maintenance." Jordan turned back slowly. "No," she said, her tone light but unyielding. "It is simply reflecting who actually has access." Daniel met her eyes, and that look swallowed the rest of his excuses. In the corner, Lily Chen still stood near the column, clutching her tablet. She barely dared to breathe, but her gaze had not left Jordan once. She knew something was coming. She had seen it in those eyes, a calm so absolute it was dangerous. "Do not tell me you tampered with the system," Brooke said, her voice cracking. "You do realize that would be illegal." Jordan gave a faint smile, not quite amused. "I did not tamper with anything. I am just reclaiming what already belongs to me." At the bar, an older investor with silver hair and a flushed face lifted his glass and spoke loudly, trying to crush the tension with his voice. "If you truly have the authority you claim, prove it instead of boasting." Jordan turned her head toward him, and her gaze was so cold that the glass in his hand trembled. "Prove it," she repeated softly. "You have already done that for me. Just look around who is shaking and who is still standing." That answer froze the room because it was true. Brooke clenched her jaw. She whipped around to the cluster of guests nearby, searching for allies, but no one would look at her anymore. The way they looked at her now was no longer admiration but caution. She turned back to Jordan, her voice almost a scream. "What are you anyway? A shareholder, some shadow investor who thinks she can walk into our world?" And Jordan cut in calmly. "Not your world. I did not walk in. I built it." The words were not loud, but they were enough to snuff out every other voice. Jason Cole, the young man filming earlier, swallowed hard, his hand shaking around his phone. He was still recording, but not for drama. He knew he was capturing something real, something rare, a moment when power had its mask ripped off, right under the golden lights of the elite. Brooke Daniel said quietly, his voice heavy, "You should stop." "Be quiet," Brooke snapped. "She is impersonating someone. Can you not see that there is no one named Jordan Ellis on the guest list?" "Because I do not need an invitation." Jordan replied, her eyes steady. "I am the one who created that list." Brooke fell silent. The air tilted. Some guests exchanged glances, some lowered their heads, others turned away. An older woman set her glass down and sighed as if she had finally found something worth witnessing. In the corner, Lily spoke up, her voice trembling but firm. She is right. All of the Hastings Foundation's assets over the past 2 years have been disclosed alongside the name Apex Capital. I saw it in the reports. Brooke spun toward her. What did you say? She is the one who kept your company from collapsing. That line was the final bullet through a fragile pane of glass. The entire room, people who thought of themselves as the center of the market, now looked at one another like passengers on a ship that had just lost its bearings. Jordan exhaled quietly. In her mind, images flashed by that night, 10 years earlier in San Francisco doors, slamming shut condescending smiles. She had never needed anyone's pity. All she had ever needed was a chance, and she had built it herself. You always asked who I am. Jordan said, her voice low. Who would dare walk into rooms like this and refuse to bow? Who stands here without a family name, without a bloodline, without an inherited legacy to justify her presence? She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. I am the one you used to look down on, and precisely because of that, I became the thing you fear most. A beat of silence followed. No one dared clap, no one dared breathe too loudly. Only the glittering lights danced along the coral dress like a kind of halo, at war with the suffocating atmosphere of the room. Daniel lowered his phone and said quietly, You have won, Jordan. Jordan turned to him, half smile, half sorrow. No, Daniel, I have not won. I have simply taken back a voice that was taken from me. Brooke, her face drained of color, stepped back half a pace. The gaze that had once been so used to making others look away was now the one that could not hold. You will regret crossing the Hastings family. She rasped. Jordan answered softly, like a reminder. Maybe. But tonight you will regret it first. She turned toward the window again. Below them, Chicago glowed brighter like a giant bloodstream of light. You think power is about who speaks? Jordan asked without looking back. No, Brooke. Power is the ability to stay silent until other people say their fears out loud. The room remained frozen, as if sealed inside an invisible layer of glass. And in that moment, the people who had laughed at her began to realize something. It was not Jordan who had wandered into their world. It was them, this loud, self-satisfied circle of power, who had accidentally stepped into hers. Outside, the August wind swept across the glass, whispering softly like a warning. A new chapter of the evening had begun, and no one in that room yet understood that the real storm was still waiting just beyond that first crack. The air in the room seemed to stop the whispers that had begun at the end of the last moment, now faded completely, as if all the oxygen had been sucked away, leaving only the distant sound of jazz music, the kind that usually exists to fill empty space, now reduced to a backdrop for a crushing silence. Jordan Ellis did not need to say anything more. She simply stood there in stillness like the eye of a storm, at the center of a room that had just lost its sense of direction. Every breath, every beat of her heart carried its own weight, not because she was forcing herself to be strong, but because everyone in this room was used to kneeling in front of loud, flashy power, and now had no idea what to do when power stood quietly right in front of them. In the left corner, Jason Cole still held his phone, the lens trembling slightly. He did not dare breathe too hard, afraid of breaking the energy that was tightening around the space. From the doorway, Megan Price, a reporter from the Financial Ledger, had just stepped in. She froze on the spot, immediately feeling the tension hanging in the air she had written about multi-billion-dollar deals and chief executives exposed by scandal. But she had never seen this a transfer of power unfolding live without documents, without any formal announcement. Brooke Hastings now seemed trapped between two realities. One was the world where she was the princess of Hastings Holdings, where a single raised eyebrow could make people step back, and the other was the reality in front of her, where the woman she had just humiliated was stealing the air straight from her lungs. Daniel Brooke said, her voice breaking, "Call security, that is an order." Daniel Mercer did not move. He looked at Jordan, then at Brooke, then around the room, where the look in people's eyes was changing with every passing second, from curiosity to recognition, from recognition to respect, and from respect to fear. Daniel Brooke screamed, her voice shrill. He flinched, pulled out his phone, and quickly called the Aurora Club security desk. "Send a team up to the Sapphire Suite immediately. There is an incident." Only a few seconds later, 2 guards entered, both dressed in black suits, tall, sharp, experienced in their posture and eyes. One of them spoke. "Ma'am, we received a report about a person who is not on the shareholder list. Please come with us to the lower floor so we can verify your status." Every eye turned to Jordan. She did not react. She was not angry, not afraid, did not offer an excuse. She simply lifted her head and looked straight at the 2 men in suits. "Do you know who rented the Aurora Club tonight?" The simple question made them stop. The taller guard glanced at Daniel as if waiting for a signal. Daniel blinked and stayed silent. Jordan pressed each word slowly and clearly. Apex Capital did, and more specifically, I did. The room held its breath again. Brooke burst out with a harsh laugh. "Oh, please stop. You think you are what, the chief executive of Netflix?" Jordan kept her eyes on Brooke, her gaze as still as a lake without a ripple. "No," she replied. "I am the one who paid, so your father could keep his company, and you are standing in a space that is being kept alive by my capital." Brooke froze, the smile on her lips shattered. You are insane," she whispered. No one would allow Jordan cut her off, her voice light as wind. "I do not need to be allowed. I bought that right already." The 2 guards exchanged a look, uncertain. Neither of them dared take another step. One of them spoke quietly. "Ma'am, we are only following regulations." Jordan turned to him, a glint of steel lighting in her eyes. "And what is the first rule in business?" The guard did not answer. Jordan did it for him. "Never lay a hand on the person who signed the check that pays you." Both guards' eyes widened. Daniel started to step forward to intervene, but stopped himself. The air thickened again. Brooke still refused to back down. She stepped closer, forcing each word through her teeth. "You are causing a disturbance, and when security drags you out, you will understand what it means to—" She did not finish her sentence because she laid her hand on Jordan's shoulder. It was just a light touch, but it shattered the boundary entirely. Jordan turned around. Not fast, not violent, just enough for everyone to feel a chill travel down their spine. Her eyes were no longer gentle. They were now like a blade drawn clear of its sheath. "You just crossed the line of liability," Jordan said slowly, her voice low and rough. Brooke gave a weak, brittle laugh. "Are you going to sue me? You think you are someone who can—" Jordan interrupted. "I am not suing anyone." She lifted her phone and the screen lit up. A new message had appeared. "Maya Lopez, red file, ready, standing by." Jordan tapped once. "Now I only need to call your father's board of directors." Brooke's face went pale. Daniel started stepping forward, more than weight. She did not look at him. Her voice stayed calm, as if she were discussing a deal. "Maya, activate Phase 1. On the other end, Maya's voice came through professional, cold, precise, like the sound of metal falling on a hard floor. "Confirmed freeze all communication channels of Hastings. Holdings send the red file to legal public relations, and the chairman of the board timestamp 8:27 p.m. The room fell silent again. Only a small ping sounded from Daniel's phone, an internal notification access suspended communications, temporarily frozen. Jason whispered, almost unable to believe it. She just froze their entire system in less than 10 seconds. Jordan turned back to the two guards. "I strongly suggest you do not touch me again," she said quietly, "unless you want to explain to a judge why you assaulted a shareholder inside her own asset." They stepped back. No one had to tell them to. Brooke looked around in panic as she realized every gaze had shifted. She screamed, grabbing at the air. "She is just a public relations stunt. Someone do something." But no one moved. Everyone understood this was no longer a party. This was a closed hearing of the truth. Jordan looked at Brooke, and there was a brief flicker of pity in her eyes. "You said I do not belong here," she murmured. "But you are wrong. I do not just belong here. I am the reason this room exists at all." Brooke opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Jordan bowed her head slightly, as if closing out a transaction. "You called me out of place," she went on, "but tonight, you are the one who is lost." Behind them, the elevator doors slid open. A draft from the hallway slipped in, stirring the thin white curtains. Footsteps rang out, slow and steady. Everyone turned. A group of people in grey suits entered the legal team of the Aurora Club, followed by Maya Lopez in a black suit, her expression unreadable and cool. Maya stopped at the doorway, looked at Jordan and gave a small nod. "Everything is ready," she said. "You only have to say go." Jordan smiled a small smile, not of victory but of confirmation. "There is no need to rush," she replied. "They deserve to witness the consequences of the silence they showed to others." She turned to Brooke, her eyes blazing under the golden lights. "You asked me what role I am playing in this story." There was a 1-second pause. Jordan tilted her head, answering softly her words, hitting every heart in the room. "I am not playing the victim, I am playing the capital." A few people drew a sharp breath, a few glasses tilted wine spilling over the rim. No one dared say anything more. Because in that moment, everyone understood that sentence was not just a comeback, it was a redefinition of power. In Chicago, the wind that night might not have been strong, but inside the Sapphire Suite of the Aurora Club, the storm had officially begun. The air in the Sapphire Room of the Aurora Club was so thick you could almost hear hearts beating from the glossy wood-paneled walls to the white curtains stirring softly in the draft. Everything seemed to be waiting for a signal to tell them whether power was still standing on their side. And in that moment, the one sending that signal was not Brooke Hastings, it was Jordan Ellis. Warm light washed across her face, carving out every line, the deep-set eyes, the resolute jaw, and the thin smile of someone who knew she held the entire board in her hands. On the other side, Brooke was still trying to stand tall, but her hands were visibly shaking. She had never had to face someone who was not afraid of her, never heard anyone speak to her in that tone, the tone of a person with enough power to make the entire Hastings family forget how to breathe. "You really think you are impressive?" Brooke laughed, clawing for a little authority. "My father only needs one phone call, and he can erase your little investment fund from the market. You really think you are that powerful?" Jordan did not answer immediately. She simply looked at Brooke the way you look at a child trying to prove its candle burns brighter than the sun. She turned her head and signaled to Maya Lopez, who was still standing silently by the door. Maya Jordan said softly, "Show them how strong real light can be." Maya nodded, opened the slim laptop in her hand, tapped a few keys, and the large screen at the end of the room flared to life. A chain of notifications appeared in rapid sequence. Apex Capital Protocol 2 activated. Hastings Holdings communication channels quarantined. Dashboard access revoked. Internal equity line, frozen exposure of 2.7 billion. The room exhaled in a single horrified gasp. Daniel Mercer was the first to react. He rushed forward, pulled out his phone, but all he saw was a line of bright red text, error 503, connection terminated. Brooke staggered back half a step, her voice breaking. "What the hell is that?" That, Jordan answered slowly, is the sound of real power. The jazz music stopped, as if even the musician understood this was no longer a party, but the funeral of a dynasty brought down. Jason Cole, the young content creator, still stood in the back, eyes wide. He whispered almost to himself, "She is sucking the oxygen out of the room." The line made Megan Price, the financial reporter, turn towards him, breathing fast. "No, she is not pulling the oxygen." Megan replied, her gaze locked on Jordan. "She owns it." Brooke still could not accept it. She lunged forward and grabbed Daniel's arm, her voice shredded. "Call my father, call him now, he will." Jordan cut across her, her tone unnervingly calm. "He will pick up, but only to receive a notification from Apex Capital's own system." A fresh alert flashed on the screenboard. Notification sent. Phase 1 confirmed. Recipients Hastings, legal public relations chair of the board. Every word was like a blade carving into Brooke's pride. She looked around, hoping someone would stand with her, but not a single person did. Even Daniel, who had once been absolutely loyal to the Hastings family, could only bow his head and say hoarsely, "She has full access." "No," Brooke screamed, eyes red. "No one gave you permission." Jordan turned back, taking one light but decisive step forward. "Brooke, do you still not understand?" Her eyes locked onto the Hastings daughter. "I do not need anyone's permission. I am the one who signs the permission." Murmurs started, then died off. No one dared look at Brooke anymore. In a far corner, Lily Chen clutched her tablet in both hands. She was shaking, but her eyes were blazing, not with fear but with the shock of seeing justice in its rawest form for the first time in her life. She did not come here to be recognized. Lily whispered she came to prove she never needed their recognition in the first place. Jordan glanced over at her, her gaze softening for a heartbeat. Then she turned back to the screen, her voice low and steady. "Maya, continue to phase 2. I want the entire Hastings holding system placed under containment mode. Understood." Maya's fingers moved quickly. The screen flickered again. Phase 2 activated full containment. Hastings core node locked. External application programming interface access revoked. Daniel stared at the display, his face stiff. You are severing the connection between the two companies?" Jordan smiled. "I am not severing anything. Daniel, I am just removing the chain they thought they were using to keep me on a leash." No one dared say another word. Brooke stood frozen. Her lips moving without sound, she turned to Daniel like a drowning person grabbing for a lifebuoy. "Do something, she is destroying my father's company." Daniel slowly shook his head. "No, Brooke, she is not destroying anything. She is taking back what she gave you." The room seemed to explode inside Brooke's mind. She stumbled back, bumping into a chair, wine spilling down her sleeve. No, this cannot be happening." She muttered, "My father would never let this happen, never." Jordan watched her, her voice level. "He let it happen the moment he allowed you to believe that power is inheritance and not competence." The sentence cut like a knife. Behind them, Megan Price was streaming live, her voice trembling. "You are watching something unprecedented in modern financial history. A silent investor has just locked down the data assets and access of $1 billion conglomerate in real time." Her phone screen filled with a rush of comments. "Who is she?" "Jordan Ellis, Apex Capital. She just killed." Hastings with silence. #Ellis move trending now. Phones buzzed across the room without pause. Internal messages, warning emails, board alerts, all arriving at once. Daniel skimmed one of them and looked up, his voice cracking. The Hastings board chair has just confirmed an emergency legal response, but they cannot do anything. Every protocol has already been locked by her. Jordan nodded, her gaze drifting somewhere far beyond the room. Exactly, because sometimes to fix a rotten system, the first thing you do is cut the power. She turned back and looked at Brooke one last time. Now, Brooke, you can call your father, but this time he will have to ask permission to speak to me. Brooke stood there, stunned into silence, her lips trembling, not from anger anymore, but from true fear. The fear of realizing she was no longer the daughter of the one in control. She was standing in front of the one who controlled the capital. Jordan turned to Maya. Send a copy of the red file to Aurora's legal team. And Maya, yes, keep the security cameras running. Tonight they are going to need proof that a woman does not have to shout to make an entire room go quiet. Maya smiled faintly, her hands moving quickly. Done. Jordan looked around the room, at the powerful faces now bowed at the cruel laughter that had vanished, leaving only a different kind of silence, the silence of realization. She spoke quietly, her voice low but ringing clear. This is not a collapse, this is a lesson. Her gaze brushed across Brooke. A lesson for those who think bloodlines can stand in for competence, that privilege can buy respect. She paused for a beat, then finished, her tone soft but razor-sharp. Sometimes all it takes is one true sentence, and an entire false empire will fall on its own. The lights bounced off the glass and back onto Jordan's face, making it glow as if the entire city of Chicago were bowing at her feet. No one dared breathe. No one dared blink. And then from somewhere in the room, a single pair of hands began to clap soft alone, followed by another and another, the applause of people who had once laughed at her, now bowing their heads in silence, as if apologizing to their own conscience. Brooke looked around, eyes brimming, lips shaking, while Jordan simply smiled, a tired but fiercely proud smile. The night at the Aurora Club was still blazing with light, but that light no longer belonged to the Hastings family. It belonged to the woman who had redefined silence and made the entire world listen. No one said another word. The last round of applause faded and died, leaving behind a long silence that cut through the room like a wound in that silence. Everyone understood that the board of power had been flipped, and the one who turned it over was not a kingpin, not a veteran chief executive, but a woman in a coral dress. Jordan Ellis stood in the center of the room, back straight eyes lifted towards the floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, nighttime Chicago still blazed with light, the glow of a city that had no idea that directly above it an empire was collapsing in silence. She turned her phone slowly in her palm. The screen lit up. Maya Lopez had sent a new message, red file delivered. Hastings legal acknowledged receipt, public relations, freeze active internal audit, triggered board status, awaiting confirmation. Jordan read it and gave a slight nod. Very good, she said quietly. Now let them find out what exit protocol really means. Maya entered a few more commands. The large screen at the front of the room filled with cold notices, each line appearing like a nail being hammered in Protocol 3, execute partial divestment. Apex Capital withdrawing exposure of $2.7 billion. Joint venture null and void pending board ratification. A dry ping sounded from Daniel Mercer's laptop. He looked down. The words on his screen were very clear. Access denied. Portfolio link terminated. Daniel blinked, his throat burning. He turned to Jordan, and his voice no longer belonged to an advisor. It was the voice of a man who had just watched the wall of power he had spent his whole career building come down in a few strokes on a keyboard. You are really pulling the capital out. Jordan dipped her head slightly. I'm not threatening anyone. Daniel, I am simply choosing the right moment to step away. Brooke Hastings gasped for air. Her face had gone so pale it was almost bloodless. No, you cannot. You are not allowed to do. You know, this will leave my father's company without liquidity. I do. Jordan answered her tone, frightening in its calm. I know that better than anyone because I am the one who kept that company alive for the last 3 years. Brooke's hands clenched, the diamonds on her necklace clinked faintly against each other. You are killing your own investment. Jordan looked straight at her. No, I am saving its dignity. Their eyes locked on one side, the panic of entitlement on the other, the composure of someone who had walked through all of this before. You think dignity can pay the bills, Brooke hissed. Jordan smiled. No, but it pays the price. You have never dared to look at the price of contempt. In the corner of the room, Megan Price was still live streaming. The views had already climbed past 50,000. Every sentence Jordan spoke was being turned into quotes by the audience and spread across social networks. I am not playing the victim. I am playing the capital, the words of Jordan Ellis, the woman who has just pulled $2.7 billion out of Hastings Holdings. Hashtags erupted like fireworks. Ellis move power in silence. Capital speaks. But inside the room, no one was thinking about social media here. Every second was one more beat in a very real collapse. Daniel leaned toward Brooke and whispered, We have to call the board right now. If we cannot negotiate, the entire project will be frozen. Brooke shook her head, her eyes wet. No, I will not let her win. She turned back to Jordan, her voice rising into a scream. You think you can play the goddess of justice. No one will remember your name, Jordan. Only the name Hastings is carved on these buildings. Jordan narrowed her eyes. You are wrong, Brooke. People do not have to remember my name. They only need to remember that on one night in Chicago, a woman who had once been looked down on made an entire system bow its head. Those words dropped the room back into a vacuum. No one dared breathe. No one dared move. And then a voice came from the doorway. She is right. Everyone turned. It was Margaret Linfield, the famous chief executive of a financial media group, who had been silently observing from the beginning. She stepped forward with a steady gait and a sharp gaze. I have been in journalism for 40 years, she said, her voice carrying clearly, and I have never seen anyone control a room without speaking more than one sentence at a time. She does not shout, she does not brag, she commands with her calm. She stopped in front of Brooke and looked her straight in the eye. And you, Miss Hastings, ought to be grateful that tonight only Megan's camera is here. If this were a public shareholders meeting, your stock price would have crashed the moment you opened your mouth. Brooke's voice caught in her throat. She looked around, searching for an ally, but the faces that had once smiled at her now met her only with evasive eyes. Jordan inclined her head to Margaret. Thank you, but I do not need defending. I only need fairness. Margaret smiled. You do not need me to defend you. I am just stating the truth. From behind them, Lily Chen stepped forward, still holding her tablet, her eyes now lit with a resolve she herself had not known she possessed. Miss Ellis, Lily said softly, but clearly I checked the Hastings and Apex joint venture account is currently showing locked status across the system. That means you have full rights to execute the exit clause without having to go through the Hastings board. The whole room stiffened. Brooke turned to Daniel. What did she say? Daniel nodded weakly. It is true the 2022 agreement has that clause. We signed it when we took the rescue funding. None of us thought she would use it. Jordan nodded and smiled faintly. That is the difference between rescue and resuscitation. Brooke 1 is just a transaction. The other is the power over life and death. Brooke opened her mouth to protest, but nothing came out. She could only pant for breath, staring around her with the hollow look of someone watching their world cave in. Jordan turned back to Maya. Confirm the withdrawal status. Maya checked her laptop, her voice firm. Complete 2.7 billion has been returned to the Apex vault. The Hastings holding system is in full isolation mode. Jordan exhaled softly and nodded. That is enough. Brooke took a step closer, her voice shaking. You cannot do this. My father will sue you, he will. Jordan turned her smile as fine and thin as a thread. Your father can sue, but when he opens the file, he will see the line Apex Capital Founding Partner, which means any lawsuit against me is an internal suit, and internal matters are still signed off by me. The room dropped back into dead silence. Even Daniel could not find a single word to plug that void. Jordan walked forward and stopped within arm's length of Brooke. You know, she said, her voice softening but still cold, I once dreamed of standing in a room like this. I dreamed of seeing these lights, of hearing the laughter of people I thought were the symbols of success, but now all I see is fear in their eyes. She lowered her gaze to Brooke, who was trembling, her lips moving without sound. You once told me I did not belong in this room. Jordan whispered, You were right. I do not belong to it. I own it. Jordan turned away and walked towards the door. Light from the hallway poured in, and laid a warm, golden halo across her shoulders. Just before she left, she spoke without looking back. Next time, if you want to try humiliating someone, make sure it is not someone who can buy your entire life with a single tap on a screen. The door opened, and the air from the corridor rushed in. Brooke stood there watching her go, her hand squeezing the stem of her glass so tightly her fingers had turned white. A bead of wine spilled over the rim and fell to the cold stone floor. It dropped small but loud, like the final sound of a cracking empire. And the night at the Aurora Club went on, but from that moment on, no one in that room ever dared speak about power in the old way again. Outside Chicago shimmered beneath a thin veil of night fog, the city lights reflecting against the giant glass wall like an ocean of light. But inside the Aurora Club, there was no more jazz, no more laughter from the investors, no more clinking of glasses. All that remained was the heavy sound of breathing from those who had just realized they were not the rulers, after all, merely the ones allowed to borrow the throne. At the center of the room, Jordan Ellis stood, not proud, not boastful. She was calm, like someone who had finished cleaning up rather than tearing down. Every gaze was fixed on her, and for the first time not a single person dared to diminish that name. Brooke Hastings remained rooted to the floor, her face pale, as if every drop of blood had been drained away. The arrogant words she had thrown out minutes earlier now echoed inside her skull, hollow and bitter. Everything within her was collapsing, layer by layer, her pride, her self-worth. Even the image of the father she had once idolized as a titan of technology. Behind her, Daniel Mercer quietly pocketed his phone, his eyes tired, yet holding a strange trace of relief, as though part of him had been waiting for this moment all along. He knew he was witnessing history, something that could never happen in a conference hall or boardroom, only when power was finally forced to look at its own reflection. Maya Lopez approached, handing Jordan the laptop. The red file has been verified, she said softly. The Hastings board has officially responded. They're requesting negotiation. Jordan glanced at the screen, her expression unreadable. No, she said quietly. Tonight I don't negotiate. I teach them silence. Maya nodded, asking nothing more. In a shadowed corner, Megan Price was still live streaming. Viewership had passed 60,000, the comment feed racing. She just redefined power. No one dares call her the token anymore. Remember that name, Jordan Ellis? Megan lowered her phone and looked up, eyes glassy. As a journalist, she had told hundreds of stories about those who fell, but rarely had she witnessed one who stood tall. Tonight, she saw a woman standing firm in the very crowd that once wanted her to bow. She whispered, "This isn't news. This is awakening." Jason Cole, the young content creator, stood near the bar. His phone had been off for a while, but his eyes hadn't left Jordan. He had seen dozens of chief executives, hundreds of power games, but he had never seen anyone end it without shouting, without threats, without blood. Just one sentence, one action, one look, and the entire room fell apart. He murmured to himself, "This isn't a battle. This is a moral lesson in real time." Jordan lifted her head and looked around. Every eye in the room was on her, but she didn't speak. She simply raised her phone and turned on the speaker. Maya's voice filled the room, clear, steady, unshaken. Official statement from Apex Capital. The total investment of $2.7 billion in Hastings Holdings will be withdrawn with immediate effect. Management of the joint venture will revert to Apex. Media operations, promotional campaigns, and all affiliate branches of the Hastings Foundation will be frozen until the internal investigation is complete. A collective exhale rippled through the room. A few people sank into their seats, glasses trembling in their hands. Brooke stumbled, almost falling if Daniel hadn't caught her. Jordan switched off the speaker, her voice low but firm. "Now they'll understand. Money isn't the only thing that can buy silence. No matter how much she has, she'll never buy back the respect she lost." Brooke opened her mouth, trying to speak, but no sound came out. She simply looked at Jordan, her gaze a mix of fear, shame, and strangely admiration. Daniel exhaled. "You can stop here, Jordan. You've already won." Jordan smiled faintly, her eyes distant. "I didn't come here to win, Daniel. I came to prove that respect isn't a privilege, it's an obligation." A notification chimed from Maya's laptop. She looked up, her tone steady. "The Hastings board has sent an acknowledgement of exit. They've accepted the withdrawal and requested the legal documents by morning." Jordan nodded, her voice softening to almost a whisper. At last, they've learned how to listen. She stepped to the center of the room, gently touched a wine glass on the table, and turned it slowly. The golden liquid swirled, reflecting the light like the flow of time, where names once worshipped had risen, then faded. "You know," Jordan said, her voice even warm, but tightening every heart that heard it. "When I began this journey, they said I would fail, that a black woman couldn't lead a billion-dollar fund, that I should learn to bow, or at least to smile when being dismissed." She paused, scanning the room. "They were wrong. Not because I'm stronger than they are, but because I taught myself I didn't need their permission to be strong." From somewhere in the room, a single pair of hands began to clap. One, then two, then three. No one dared to start, but no one could bring themselves to stop. The applause spread deep and resonant, not out of celebration, but recognition. Jordan bowed her head slightly, then said almost to herself, "Sometimes you don't have to prove your worth. You just have to make them realize they never knew how to see it." Brooke looked up, her eyes blurred with tears, staring at the woman she had humiliated only minutes before. You really believe that?" Jordan turned toward her, smiling softly. "Not believe, Brooke. Live it." She set the glass down and turned to Maya. "Activate the final phase. I want them not only to lose the money, but to remember why." Maya opened the laptop, the glow of the screen reflecting on both their faces, one young one seasoned, yet carrying the same expression, calm, unyielding, unapologetic. Protocol final total exit confirmed, joint venture dissolved, contracts nullified, access revoked, public disclosure draft, pending. Jordan took a deep breath and said quietly, "Release it in the morning, but don't write a victory anthem, write the truth." Maya nodded. What message should it carry? Jordan looked out the window, where the city still burned bright beneath her. Just one line, she said. Respect is not granted by birth, it's earned by presence. She turned and walked towards the door. The room behind her remained silent, but every pair of eyes that had once looked down on her now followed with the same feeling reverence. And as the door closed behind her, someone no one knew who whispered, "That's not an ending. It's the beginning of a new era." Outside, the wind from Lake Michigan swept in, carrying the chill of night and the warmth of change. In the golden glow reflecting off the streets, Jordan Ellis walked forward, her posture straight, her gaze unwavering. She needed no praise, no applause. She needed only one thing to let the silence of this night speak for her. Because when truth is strong enough, it doesn't have to shout to be heard. As the doors of the Aurora Club closed behind Jordan Ellis, the noise finally faded away. The room inside was still full of people, but it felt as if the power had left with her. Brooke Hastings stood in the middle of the still air, her eyes blankly fixed on the half-empty glass of wine in her hand, her breathing short and heavy. She was no longer the Princess of Hastings, just someone who had been forced to grow up in a single night. Daniel Mercer remained beside her silent. He looked at Brooke, then at the door. "She didn't destroy us," he said quietly. "She just showed us who was really in control." At the far end, Maya Lopez stood motionless, her calm gaze reflecting off the laptop screen in her hands, where the final line glowed, "Protocol complete, Apex Capital Sovereign." As for Jordan, she walked through the grand hall of the Aurora, where golden light spilled across the marble floor like a river of stars. The attendant bowed, but she only nodded lightly, her heels clicking in a steady rhythm, confident without the need for noise. Outside, the wind from Lake Michigan drifted softly past. She paused at the steps, looking out at the city stretching before her, where the lights flickered like millions of human decisions. In her eyes there was no pride, only peace, because she knew tonight was not a victory, but a correction of justice. She smiled faintly, whispering as if to herself, "It's time they learned to listen in silence." And so Jordan Ellis walked away, carrying no applause, only the weight of the respect she had just made. The world returned to her. The black sedan glided down Michigan Avenue, the city lights reflecting through the window and tracing across Jordan Ellis's face, calm, no longer angry, carrying only the stillness of someone who had just completed her mission. In her earpiece, Maya Lopez's voice came through. "Miss Ellis, the media is exploding. #Ellis Move is #1 worldwide. CNBC, Forbes, they all want interviews." Jordan looked out the window, the passing lights flickering across her deep eyes. "No need," she said softly. "This story isn't for me to tell. It's for them to think about." She unlocked her phone and glanced at the final notification. Apex Capital Full Sovereignty confirmed. A quiet breath, a faint smile. Behind her, the Aurora Club still glowed brightly, but that light was now an empty shell, a hollow reminder of those who had once laughed and were now silent. Jordan looked out over the city, stretching like a map of the future, a future where women like her would no longer need to ask for a place because they would be the foundation itself. She whispered, sending her words into the Chicago night wind. True power isn't about proving anything. It exists to remind the world that even silence has a voice. From the perspective of an expert in ethical leadership, the story of Jordan Ellis is not merely a clash between layers of power, but a reminder that true strength does not lie in one's voice. It lies in the choice to remain silent until the right moment to act. She did not need to shout to be heard, nor did she need to prove herself to be recognized. She simply stood still, and the world bowed on its own. If you believe that respect does not come from privilege, but from integrity and competence, like to share this message, subscribe to follow more journeys where justice is rewritten through calm resolve, and comment below with the phrase that embodies your belief: keep your dignity.